seconds. Okay, we're now live. Welcome to the first Hangout for writing for games, creative writing for media. No, sorry, creative writing Master of Fine Arts 610 at Folsom University, and we'll be having some time for Q&A, and then going to take a look at a game that is not exactly chock full of writing or narrative, but uses some of the techniques we've already practiced in our class. Very popular little game called Fast and Light, or FTL, just for a little while, depending on how long time permits. So if anyone has any questions or anything they want to talk about, go ahead and start now. And if people don't have questions, that's fine. We can, give another minute or two for people to show up, and then move into doing the Let's Play and transition back to having some question time at the end of the session if need be. So, let me check and see. There are no new posts on the watch page for this session. Anyone have any questions or topics they want to discuss? No? Okay, well, another 30 seconds to a minute to see who else shows up. And if in just a few moments longer here, if we don't have anyone else in attendance, we'll take a look at Fast and Light, and then come back with enough time to chat a bit about it. Okay, I figure it's just us. So. I'm sharing my desktop now, pulling Fast and Light to the top. Oops, there's the Hangouts window. I'm going to turn the sound back up here. So you can at least get some of the ambient sounded music without it being overwhelming. I haven't been playing Fast and Light on my work computer, so this is a completely clean install of the game, which shouldn't have any progress on it. Fast and Light was one of the games that blew away expectations on Kickstarter. I'm going to assume that you all know what Kickstarter is. We can take questions about that at the end of the session if we need to. And as you can see, the game has very, very simple art. It's utilitarian. It isn't even necessarily entirely clear at the beginning of the game exactly what's going on with the story, though it's sufficient to know that there's been some kind of war in outer space, and that you are part of the Federation, which didn't do too well in the climactic showdown, and you're carrying important data away from the crushing defeat, trying to get to survivors. This is what Fast and Light looks like when you're not engaged in combat. You've got a schematic of your ship with really what basically amounts to just a little bit of art flair or presentation in terms of the parts that are external to ship, and really all that matters in gameplay are your crew members, the rooms of your ship, and your general controls. This is a game that is going to involve some branching narrative, like the narrative you did for Summit 1. And otherwise, the story is mostly emergent, or to use the perhaps successfully academic terms or neologisms I did in my own doctoral dissertation, processual, where the sense the player gets of being involved with the story comes almost purely out of gameplay and a sense of the world, rather than a really defined narrative. You can have emergent gameplay in games with quite a bit of writing, but games that have a lot of writing tend to be a little bit more controlled in terms of how the player interacts with, well, what choice the player has and what the consequences are. Fast and Light, you start just knowing that you're here and you have to get to the exit for this sector before you can jump to the next one. Pick a location. And we've had our first encounter. A missile shoots across your bow when the jump completes. Your scans quickly reveal a ship with pirate markings pursuing an unknown vessel. The pirate hails you. Damn it, we weren't expecting company. Instead of this, and you could profit. Something that games can do, and sometimes do very well or very poorly, is natural ethical consequences. That is to say, in a game, a player can be presented with choices about how to behave, where the results of those choices are based on the consequences of the decision and not handed to the player as what the protagonist of the game must do based on their morals, or forced based on an external kind of morality system the player has to adhere to. Fast and Light has results. It does not have a game that it doesn't track the player's decisions in the obvious ways that games that have like light side and dark side points, like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic does. So here, it's a pretty safe bet that if you accept the pirate's bribe, you will get this stuff, and there'll probably be no further complications. Sometimes scenarios that you don't always have the same potential results of your decisions in this game. So that is to say that you could have this scenario come up, and maybe there's a chance, maybe 1 in 10 or whatever, that accepting the bribe leads you into some other sort of trouble. But the game gives you relatively realistic consequences, and that is you're on the run. If you try to be a hero, then you are choosing a higher risk course of action, which might have a higher payoff, or might lead to you being purely disadvantaged as either a strictly pragmatic decision for the player, or potentially a moment where the player chooses to make a decision because of how they want to play the game and who they want to be within the world of the game. In this case, choosing to intervene in this pirate's attempt to destroy some apparently harmless ship. I've engaged them in combat, and now we get what the bulk of the game looks like. This may seem uninteresting, even tedious. That's part of why I chose Fast and Light. This is an incredibly popular game. Because what it isn't is terribly pretty. What it is a great presentation of game mechanics in a lucid way for the player who is relatively serious about their gameplay. In this case, we just exchanged fire, and now I've got a breach in my hull that is currently sucking all the oxygen out of my atmospheric controls room, which means not only is my environmental generation down, but that if I don't repair it quickly, I will have a hard time getting people into that room to repair it because there's a hole, a breach to outer space. So, sending 2 crew members in, and opening some doors here to help keep air flowing. And meanwhile, I've got my weapons charging again. Oops, I just... And now, this being further in the game, I can probably take out this pirate ship with my next blast. And they break apart. And nominal rewards for destroying the pirate ship. Sometimes a blown up ship leaves quite a bit of usable material, sometimes not much. As the pirate explodes, and behind a substantial collection of useful scrap material, you go to examine the ship you just saved. Think the Heavens you showed up, we don't have much to offer as a reward, but our engineers should be proficient enough to patch your ship a bit after that nasty fight. Well, early in the game, bonus hull points are not all that great a reward. So, if I'm playing from a kind of strictly pragmatic perspective, I've probably been better off letting the pirate ship take down this vessel. Meanwhile, my environmental system is working fine again. It's just I've got sending these crew back to their regular stations in engineering and weapons. The pinkish color means that the oxygen levels are below what they should be, but not yet dangerous. I mean, this is very crunchy gameplay. It's not as hardcore as some games out there, which make no attempt whatsoever to cater to an amateur audience. In fact, this game really doesn't take that long to learn. But it's a graphically, stylistically consistent. That's important. A mix of art styles can make a game look very amateurish, but it's graphically consistent, but with very simple art, and with these kind of minimal story snippets. Really, they're pretty tactical rather than narrative. You can see here, an advanced Rebel automated ship remains stationed near a small Rebel space station, and is indicated that it's a storage vessel for military goods. We can attack the ship to get to the storage cache, and I suppose a little bit of, well, hardly revenge on the rebels, because this is just an automated ship, or we can pass by and avoid the risk. See, this ship doesn't even have a shield unit, so I'm just going to work on taking out their weapons. This, to any of you who are more I have gotten too used to playing this on my tablet. I just turn, there we go. Salvage what you can from the broken ship. Investigate. And we just got some more scrap we can use to upgrade our ship and a new weapon system. Fast and Light has been called a roguelike in reference to a very old and venerable genre of games that mostly take place of Dungeons and Dragons style dungeon crawls. The original Rogue was a game where you played as a rogue or thief exploring a dungeon, trying to get to the bottom level and recover the treasure there. It had ASCII graphics, meaning that they were nothing more, nothing less than characters, like a small G appearing on the screen might be a goblin. As different as that may seem, from what we're looking at here, people have considered Fast and Light to be a roguelike game simply because it's got a lot of random generation, and as you play on, high risk of not being able to complete the game the first playthrough, and if your ship gets blown up, the only thing to do is to start a new game. Mining base, nearby planet, abandoned, no life signs, nothing here. A heavily damaged Federation ship is hiding in the nebula at this beacon. Before you have time to make contact with them, they fade into the nebula. You can try and follow and help them, or keep your position. While searching fruitlessly through the nebula, you stumble upon the rebel ship which the Federation loyalists were likely hiding from. You prepare for a fight. I'm not going to explain the strategy of Fast and Light in too much detail. There are much better well-established sources for that available online. But right now I am attempting to launch a heavy missile. Oh, it missed. I wasn't paying enough attention. To take out my enemy's shields, and then allow me to wow, they seem to have oh. That means damage to engineering, which means the officer, well, actually he wasn't significantly engineered. Excuse me. Significantly injured, but the officer could have been hurt, and now my Fast and Light drive is damaged, but only partially, so I can still jump when I have the chance. Right there, my drive just jumped, so I can now jump away from these people and avoid that fight. Now this time it says that the rebel fighter I've encountered is powering up their FTL drive. If they get away, they will no doubt warn the fleet of your position. So this time I have an extra incentive that was for anyone familiar with this game is going to see that I'm playing rather shabbily here, but that's really not the point at the moment. What I want to do is I want to see if I can quickly get just a little bit further on in the game so we have a chance to see how the player might develop a little bit of attachment to their crew as they continue, and then how quickly that can be that attachment can be shattered by a bad decision or simple bad luck. I probably should repair. Oh, as soon as you have a small mantis ship detaches from a wreck and jumps away, there's salvage options. You find a weapon ready to be installed. Well, that's nice. I should probably take some time now to repair my med bay. It's been damaged since an earlier fight. Many hands make work go more quickly, but the ship can't go anywhere without a pilot. So Lexi has developed some piloting skill in the course of making several jumps. Fenn is working on becoming a competent engineer. And Kirkner will, if he lives long enough, become my weapons officer. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. That on. Now I have reached the exit for this sector, so I can choose the next sector I go to. Notice that this game does a whole lot of presenting the player with binary choices or small numbers of options. This is actually can be very good game design, and something to think about as a writer, especially when you're attempting to offer the player an infinite open world they can do whatever they want in. That people tend to handle 2 to at most maybe 5 options well at a time. When people feel like they have to start on a blank sheet of paper, they can become a little bit intimidated. The Rock people are a powerful and proud race. Not unheard of to have a peaceful journey through their lands, but don't count on it. You can tell that this is a very nuanced science fiction epic with a whole lot of subtle and thorough development, because the aliens are called things like rocks. Yeah. Again, that's not the goal of Fast and Light. This is not Mass Effect. A rock mining vessel is harvesting rich asteroids. Their scouts take your presence to be a transgression. Battle stations. We're also in an asteroid field, so we will have to worry about random asteroid hits. For Pete's sake. I'm playing very poorly right now. Better pause the game before I just Oh, yeah. My weapons got disabled by an ion blast, and I wasn't paying attention. Oh, and my got a fire in the oxygen room. This may be the end of our tonight's brief sojourn with Fast and Light right here. My shields have been disabled. I've got a fire burning in my environmental room. I was not paying close attention and have not made much progress on disabling this or destroying this ship that's shooting at me. In fact, maybe the best thing to do, keep him here and jump away. The distress beacon, that's probably even more dangerous. Let's go there. Find the source of the distress call, a small research station. It appears to be a small laboratory fire got out of control, and it's starting to destroy the station. Their fire suppression system is not responding. You can send your crew to help put out the fire. You can dock and try to rescue survivors, or you can leave. We try to put out the fire. Let's see. It violently keeps the fire long enough to allow some of the scientists to escape. Just a losing battle. For long, you order the retreat. The few scientists they're able to save are distraught but grateful. You'll drop them off at the next station. Gathered some scrap. Now let's see if we can save the ship. Oh. the fire out, but my environmental systems are still down. Get this repaired while I still have a chance. Opening the doors throughout the rest of my ship, attempt to kind of level out the damage. Oh, and one of my crew members just died of asphyxiation. If I can't get this fixed now, then it really is game over. Oops. Don't do that. Oh, and I didn't powered. And because I didn't have power in reserve to power back up my environmental systems, even though I fixed the system, it didn't come back on, and there wasn't much oxygen left in the ship, so the last of my crew members just asphyxiated. Not a very glorious attempt to save the Federation. Okay, returning to regular presentation now. I want to see what you all think, having seen Faster Than Light, including for those of you who are less gamers, what you think about the game's presentation, and also what you think about the fairly simple branching narrative, and whether or not you feel that players can develop significant attachment to the characters in a game like that, where they are just little heads and shoulders. But then again, if you've played The Sims are more detailed, but are still pretty abstract. So, Amanda, Eliza, Philip, thoughts?
Well, I mean, I've played roguelike games before, and you definitely get attached to certain characters. Even in like Rogue's Legacy, where the point is to
Yeah.
put a meat grinder until you get one that succeeds. Like certain ones you get attached to and remember. So I think people get attached to just about anything in video games, though.
Well, and Eliza texted or posted it in the chat, text chat, something that easily become attached to this crew. Yes, partially for reasons that are incentivized by the game itself. Your crew members get better at what they're doing as they do it. But they're your kind of window into that world. Rogue Legacy is a good example because it's a lighthearted game, but in it, each time your character dies, you get presented with a choice of 3 potential descendants with their own abilities and sometimes quirks. Sometimes these things are distinctly disadvantageous, like being nearsighted. But if you play a character in that game, the act of playing, you start to develop a sense of how that character plays, which in some cases might be dramatically different from the last character you played. And then when the character functionally inevitably dies, because Rogue Legacy is called that because it draws on the tradition of roguelike games, for all the gameplay mechanics are more like a Castlevania game. Side-scrolling action, for those of you. Side-scrolling action role-playing. But yeah, there is something about playing a game, if you get into it. This totally does not work if it's not your kind of game. That promotes a sense of affinity. Yeah, Eliza, you said that during gameplay you can often feel like the character if the personality is similar to your own. And while characters with more strongly developed personalities may offer more opportunity if they're similar enough, characters with minimal personalities or with lots of room in their personality, lots of player input into their behavior and personality, offer access in that way at the kind of broadest level. This is the argument for making video game protagonists that have minimal character, or where the player determines almost everything about who they are. And Amanda, creating characters that are very different from you can be fun. It doesn't give you the same immediate sense of maybe being them, but that's one of the great freedoms that video games can offer, is to decide within the parameters of the game what the protagonist is going to be like, and that it will interact depending on the game with the system. Someone may play Fast Lane a couple of times and always try to be a goody two shoes and not get too far, and then find that being a bit more of a scallywag is more successful, and develop a sense of what it might be like within the game mechanics of FTL to be the kind of captain who could actually get the message through. I think there's actually room for all of these things, and as a writer, you have to think about what is you're trying to achieve and what where there's room for you as a writer. Fast and Light was a project largely by two programmers. There was not a dedicated writer for Fast and Light. The game didn't require it. If they had chosen to bring in an outside writer, someone with strong chops, it could have added something to the game, but they made the decision for that particular game, probably wisely, to not build up the lore and world to a great degree, and to make the interactions highly complex. One game, there are a couple of games I'm thinking about looking at later this month, specifically as kind of counterpoint to that. One of which is a game called Out There, which is also a game about being lost in space, but it's a game where you're trying to figure out how to get back home, as opposed to trying to fight your way through a hostile fleet. And it's one that has much, much more development of the world and of the protagonist of the game. But in the process, Out There makes some assumptions about who that game's protagonist is, including, and this seems gratuitous to me because I've never encountered anything out there that requires the protagonist, the single lost human, trying to get back to Earth, even though it's distinctly possible that tens of thousands of years have passed and Earth might not exist anymore. The protagonist of Out There is a man. That's just something that is established early on in the game setup. You didn't see it because it's some on the setup screen, but in Fast and Light, you can choose within a very limited range of options the gender, or at least the hairstyle, of your crew members, and also from a limited palette of skin tones. So you can have an all-female crew, or for that matter, you can choose the more masculine hairstyle and decide that character is female, and nothing in the game is ever going to contradict you. As in writing games, you have to figure out what it is that you want to control and what the consequences of that are. The Mass Effect games, which I mentioned earlier, are a good example of games that have a lot of highly developed plot and lore, but also, by design, give the player almost complete freedom to shape the general look, including some of the style as well as the obvious markers of gender of the game's protagonist. And those games came out of the tradition. Well, were developed by the same company and some of the same people who worked on Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, which was a groundbreaking game in that regard. None of these games offer absolute freedom. Try to play Knights of the Republic and decide that you want a Jedi who's got more of a full figure or maybe a bit of a pot belly. It's just not an option. You can't do it. Skin tone of the character's face, yes, but that you can't do. So thoughts at this point? I was relatively expecting that House will come with questions tonight, so I planned for a short Let's Play session. If we run out of stuff to talk about, we can always end the session early. But does anyone have anything they want to talk about, either in terms of Fast and Light or what I've been talking about in terms of games writing, or things they just want to raise for discussion? Okay. Let me ask each of you then, what, if anything, you have been playing lately? And lately might mean back before the winter break.
I've been playing Fast and Light. That's what I was doing before. Minutes before I came here. I killed a dragon and ran downstairs to the chat.
Well, there we go. And I know you're playing World of Warcraft, and so then, whether it's verbally or over the text chat, see if you can pick out for me one thing about the way the writing was done that struck you. It could be something bad or good or interesting, something about how characters are developed or a bit of background lore of the world. Anything. So I want one thing from each of you. It can also be social. It can be interactive with other players, because that potential is a huge part of the design of MMO games.
I feel like the thing I like about the new Dragon Age is the second one was very developed as a video game in mind, and they kind of moved away from the story because they had to rush it out within a year. But this one, you can actually see the love and everything that they put into the characters, and each character has quirks that they never really took time in the second game to acknowledge, and that a lot of video games don't acknowledge. Like the hardcore religious knight, female knight who goes around hunting mages, loves romance novels, like things, just small things like that I find hilarious.
Right. Well, and that's something that was something that the first Dragon Age game was acclaimed for, and Dragon Age 2, many people felt that they polished up the system, and depending on how much they cared about the characters, that they either didn't spend as much time on that or just dropped the ball on characterization. Inquisition, Dragon Age Inquisition is also a game that I've been meaning to find time to play. I know that game it's like many role-playing games, it can take up a lot of time. Partially because it has a transgender character in it. This is something really quite new for a games, especially big gaming companies, because the industry has been very slow to include any kind of queer representation other than the most kind of over-the-top images of let's call it lesbian chic rather than lesbian characters, and even that is not exactly it was never as prevalent as certain other kinds of objectification. Let's see, Eliza, you talked about Final Fantasy XIV. A lot of characters is up to the player, but yeah, you're going to be a hero. Your destiny is set. Um, right, Amanda, that's a good point about World of Warcraft and setting up a world with a persistent ongoing conflict and building on previous games, their real-time strategy games, the Warcraft games, in which the orcs and the horde were generally presented as the bad guys. The lore gets deep enough in WoW that if you're actually looking into it, the horde is not as simple or as necessarily unlikable as they seem, or that they're not bad. They've lost their way. That there is realm for meaningful character development there beyond something as simple as I like bad. As someone who has a love-hate relationship with fantasy, I do often wonder exactly what the orcs are doing in many fantasy worlds, novels and games alike. They often seem to have just kind of somehow wound up serving some sort of eternal evil, and well, you can kind of blame Tolkien for that. It's fresh enough when Tolkien did it, but something a little bit more nuanced. You played original Warcraft on top? Yeah. I don't think I ever played Warcraft. I did play Warcraft 2. Tides of Darkness. So, well, if no one has any questions, I'm sufficiently. Sorry, for you watching. I just commented that the game playing Warcraft was ruined when she got the hacks, the cheats for it. Yeah, being able to go through effortlessly can sometimes not only ruin the game as you're playing it at the time, but it also sometimes ruin the experience of the game as a whole. We so often think, yeah, motherload cheater in Sims 3. Cheat, yes. Which that one gave you, it didn't give you infinite wealth, right? That just gave you a ridiculously huge amount of money, and then suddenly there was no reason to aspire. 50,000? Okay. No reason to aspire toward higher levels of the game. Oh, okay, I can buy all the great stuff I wanted to give my Sims. And suddenly it doesn't mean so much. Maybe there's a metaphor for life here, maybe not. So, anyone have anything that they want to ask or anything they want to talk about? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap a little bit early tonight. I'm okay with doing that. And obviously, if you think of anything later, you can contact me. And whether it's out there, whether we do a look at out there when we do our second Google Hangout of the month, which will be more focused on branching dialogue in Twine, or something else, I'm going to try and loop back to some of what we talked about and what we saw earlier today or this evening. So, well, folks, it's been a pleasure having you. Not the most, sometimes these things get deep, sometimes they don't. It sounds like you're all doing well. I'm glad to hear that. And again, if you have any questions or something comes up, half an hour after we're done here, contact me. And for all of you who are watching, which hypothetically should be the whole entire rest of the class, but I know that people don't always watch all of my videos. At least not the longer ones like this. I hope you're doing well, and want to remind you as well, if you're struggling with anything, to contact me, and the sooner the better. Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast now. Good night and good luck, everyone.